Up. All right. All right. Let's start our bio class. I don't know if my stream is actually on. Is my mic? Let me check my mic. I think it's on. Cool. All right. Let's get started. I haven't seen you guys for like a week. My allergies are. It's like the worst season for me right now, but I think I can manage. Um, Hopefully y'all are doing okay because I totally get that you want to graduate right now, and I want the same for you all as well. I think right now it's like end of April. It seems like we're so close, but not so close at the same time. Hopefully, as the weeks progress, they'll get a little bit easier. I know getting things in or getting distracted is a big thing. Like totally, I get it. Especially now that our days are getting nicer, and I think that's it's going to get even more challenging because you want to be outside, right? Let me just kind of pause this. Yeah, so moving forward, I'm glad things are working out. I'm glad that you guys like the structure of this class as the best as we can do because obviously we're not there, and like I'm not there, you're not there. Yeah, like this Teams is actually quite useful. I think I'm gonna keep using this for the like remainder of my teaching career, however long that is. But it seems like it's pretty useful because I get to see you guys. I don't know if I show you the insights, but like I think I did. But like I can see the online presence of you guys in the activity. I know the ones who have been joining the live streams like live. You guys have been keeping update with the discussions and all that. That's great. I just want to thank you guys for that. And I know some of you are watching this after because maybe you guys are sleeping still, and I know like getting up at 9:45 is not something easy to do. I have decided to not take care of myself, and maybe I want to see how much I can grow in the next 4 months. But I'm realizing having this is not that great for allergies. So let's see how far we can get. Hey Jenna, Eric, you're here. Haley, you're here. Evan, Owen, Joel, you're here too. That's great. So if you haven't told me that you're here, let me know, please. Yeah, no, it's great too. It's so weird though. Sometimes it's just like sitting in front of my computer, just talking to a camera, and I don't know like what you guys are doing. Sometimes I think you just like have this video on while like doing something else, and then you're like, oh, the video's over, and then do something else. So I like having you guys chat in the chat room, even though if it's not biology related, because it keeps me interested. And yeah, so hey Hannah, hey Anna too. So it's great, Joel. Yeah, do it. Let's see how much you can grow. I think it's a great time. I think I want to see Eric do this as well. But yeah, like my wife has started cutting my hair. Like she has cut my hair 2 times already. The first one was a little bit safer. I think I told you this already. So like we used the shaver for my dog's fur, and then we used that. I think we started off with like number three, which is like I don't know, half an inch, and then I was like, I think it needs to be shorter. So then she went to like number two. I don't know what the depth of that is, and then eventually it went to like number one here. And so you can see that there is like a distinct line, and this is not even like clear. But apparently on Monday, all the salons where what hairstylist place are open, but I can't even go there now because like my hair is pretty short, so I have to sort of live with this for a little bit. But it'll do because it was getting so long. It's kind of funny. I hope you guys are all doing well. Let me know in the chat. I like hearing from you. Yeah, that's totally cool. Um, I love hearing the stuff that you guys are talking about in the case study groups. I know like I've created a lot of different case study groups, and it gets kind of confusing which group to post. Totally, I was trying to figure how I can make that a little bit better. Um, the last case study about like the sperm donation or harvesting sperm from a deceased husband, just to be really specific, it's interesting because I know a lot of you were saying like, oh, let's um without the person's consent, which is totally right, right? Like, without the person's consent, we shouldn't do that. I wonder if there is a loophole and a benefit to, or somebody like vile that would do that, right? I'm sure there are, right? Because um, I think a lot of like celebrities or even like really powerful like politicians and athletes like really have to sort of protect themselves, because like once you sort of have a kid with a partner, even if it's just someone you just met, whatever, right, then you're legally bonded to that child, so then you have to pay child support and all that, and maybe some people are that like vile to do that. So um, terrible. Yeah, like the devil's advocate, right? Like when I was reading your responses, all you guys were like, "Yeah, I agree, I agree." And I'm like, man, we just need somebody to say, maybe what if we were to have this? And I think Taryn is really good with that because he tends to have a different perspective, which I totally appreciate because it's sometimes good to be challenged and sometimes good to have a different perspective, right? And sometimes it's good to question, like, hey, is this what it should be? And also the evolution chat about your thoughts on evolution is really interesting too, because I had that sort of thought or question to the class last year, and last year majority of the class, it was like an overwhelming like, I don't believe in evolution, because there were a lot of people who had their religious beliefs and brought that in, which is really interesting because I even said to the class, I was like, man, this is probably the first time I've had a class in a public school, obviously, that people are like, let's not, like, evolution has its sort of limits, and then and all of that. So it was really interesting to go from that from last year to this year. And evolution, I think, as you sort of progress in life, I guess, to have experience and wonder and all of that, it's interesting because you start questioning about the purpose of life, because like sometimes, especially now, sometimes when you're sitting out alone and or like in your backyard, like yesterday it was a gorgeous day and we're just sitting outside and we're just staring at the sky, and I was like, wow, this is crazy, right? Like if you stare up at the sky, it's just like this blue, endless blue, right? And then you think we're just like, my daughter is one, like, is already saying like, oh, aren't we in space? And then and she said, well, I don't think we're in space because we're on Earth. And I was like, well, Earth is sort of in space, right? Because we're flown in space. And then if you start expanding all that, right, like Earth is just in space, and then what's in space and different planets, different solar systems, and different like galaxies, and it's like, whoa, what's going on here, right? And then if we were to narrow it down to like human species, to like all the different, like even right now it's the best time to see it outside, right? In the springtime, they like, you can see all the like the plants, like, starting to sprout. There's the insects are coming out, right? Like, Owen, you probably know all those insects that are coming out, right? And then to see like, wow, like life is still like going on, progressing, and they're resilient, right? Like you have this harsh winter, and then they come out, and then I think that's like the spirit of life, is that we're resilient regardless of what challenges and adversity that we have to face. It's crazy, but then it also makes you wonder, like, what is the purpose? And I don't know. Anyway, um, oh, and you had a question about grade 11 students. Grade 11 students are great. Like, our live stream for grade 11 class is a little bit later, so which maybe is the reason why there are more people in attendance. There's like, I have a class of maybe 26, and we have like 20 people in our live streams. Yeah, but it's at 11 o'clock, so it's a little bit later. And like, I mean, 9:45 is already late because your class time is at 9, right? It's just that I have staff meetings at 9, so then I have to like multitask and set all this stuff up during your staff meetings. But yeah, really, really cool. Um, yeah, so I have another case study which I'll post up, but let's kind of wrap up with the evolution stuff, and then we're going to jump into biodiversity. I'm looking at the calendar. Like realistically, we have like 5 more weeks, so like 10 more classes of this. So we gotta get moving on this, right? Like we don't really have that much time because it's two a day, and I want to do some dissections with you. So like, let's kind of finish up the evolution. jump into biodiversity. Maybe we'll have like a dissection a week. That'll be pretty neat. And I'll send you guys like the material. We'll walk you through it. And then you guys have to like, not do the dissections, but like have the diagrams in front of you. So then we're going to do this step by step during the live stream. It'll be great if you guys can use a computer to watch it, because it's probably really small on the screen if you're using your phone for the dissections, but we'll get there and we'll talk about it. All right, let's go into just finish off the evolution. I got a bunch of videos to show you today, and let me see. Here's the class notebook. This is on the screen. So let's look at the class content. Evolution is, I just wanted to talk about the evolution, about like some of the background. So hopefully you got a gist of evolution. Obviously there's a lot on evolutionary research, but as we talked about it last week, there's a couple points, like 5 points about Darwin, and Darwin's point is really hold on a second. My mouse is not working with my screen here. There we go. Darwin's points is really looking at, because he went to the Galapagos. This is his really main points, right? In order for things to evolve, you have to have that, competition. Overproduction will lead to competition, because then, everybody is breeding lots. You got tons of kids, but then there's not enough resources to support all of the offspring, right? So you have to compete. You're going to have sort of variety in your genetics, so then those traits can be passed down. And then during all of this survival, you're going to compete for survival, and we're going to talk about survival of the fittest. And then eventually the ones that sort of are better adapted to the environment. So remember again, before I said, or not before I said, but like the thing I emphasized was that survival of the fittest is not like the strongest or the biggest, right? You're going to see in different organisms, and I'm going to show you, is that it doesn't necessarily have to be the biggest or whatever, right? Like if you think about what's happening now, like the biggest thing that's affecting us are not things that we can even see, right? Tiny little viruses are is affecting the entire world, right? So that's crazy, right? And the concern is that maybe that virus could eventually evolve as well and change forms, right? So like this is part of that evolutionary the trait that can lead into evolution, and then eventually once offsprings have competed, adapted well, and they're sort of different than before, then a new species will form, and a species is only formed in that population. Remember, so evolution is the population changing, not individuals. So like suddenly if I were to have another kid, the kid suddenly can fly, right? That's not evolution, that's just a mutation. But if their offsprings and offsprings and offsprings, that population were to be generated, then yeah, that's evolving. But of course that's not going to happen. No, but because I'm not going to have another kid, so I think 2 is enough. You probably saw my Twitter, and it was pretty crazy during my chem class yesterday because they just sat on my lap, not because I wanted them to. So we talked about adaptation is adapting to the environment. So let's talk about survival of the fittest for a second here. So remember, again, survival of the fittest, or what makes an organism fit, is looking at the ways that an organism can adapt to the environment that they're living in, right? So if you think about all the places you've been, traveled to, all the different environments that things can survive. So don't look at it on the surface level like, okay, grass, right? Think about everything in this world, right? So think about things in the soil, right? Think about things that are like, you might have a shed in your backyard and that's shaded away from the sun, damp. Things are living there as well, right? Or in the up a mountain where there's low air pressure, right? Things are there as well. So like you can have underground, you can find them in caves everywhere on the planet. Life is so like resilient that it has to grow. It's crazy, right? Like there's life like all over. So survival of the fittest is really finding the best way to adapt to that environment. So there's a couple of things. Is that adaptation is really the result of natural selection, right? Because natural selection is using the environmental factors to make an organism adapt, right? To change, right? To be successful, right? So when we say successful, it means to survive, right? Either to for protection, to eat, to reproduce. Even though it might not be like completely perfect for the environment, but it sort of gives them that edge or advantage once they have those adaptations. So if you think about seriously all the animals that are out there, right? Like, it's pretty neat. So let's look at one thing here that I have. I have a playlist of bioclass which I show, but this is one, and this is called the stock-eyed. Let me see if it's on the screen. Fly. Check it out.
Malaysia in Southeast Asia. This strange insect has been lying dormant on the forest floor for 2 weeks in the form of a pupa. Soon after casting off its pupa case, the male fly climbs a tree to begin an amazing transformation. He begins by gulping in air bubbles, forcing them up into his head. He then pumps the bubbles into the stalk supporting his eyes, just as if he were blowing up a balloon. A few final adjustments to straighten out any unsightly creases, and he's ready for action. This is a bug whose eyes bug out, literally. The stalk-eyed fly. Yes, those are his eyes on the end of those stalks. They may look unwieldy, but females love a bug with really long stalks.
Open your eyes.
A transfer RNA molecule is composed of about 75 nucleotides.
If you're an octopus or a cephalopod, you need to really
totally muted. Yeah, it's pretty cool to see that stock-eyed, right? Like, pretty neat to see that adaptation. And males and females are different. Males have to have that to sort of attract the mates. So for the females to think like, hey, I'm gonna mate with a fly that has really stocky eyes, right? So they're gonna choose the males with the stockiest eyes that they are. So if you think about the successive generations of that, right? Like every generation, the female is going to select the ones with stockier eyes, eyes that are wider, etc., etc. Eventually, after like thousands and millions of generation, that eye became further away from the body, right? And that's how that stock-eye fly happened. Pretty neat. Yeah, exactly, right? Oh, man, that's so neat. Here's the next one. This is pretty cool. I showed this to my daughter, and she's like, "Oh wow, this is pretty neat." But this is the shape-shifting octopus, and which we'll talk about. This is one adaptation that organisms have as well.
really understand how to use your surroundings to hide. In the next scene, you're going to see a nice coral bottom, and you see that an octopus would stand out very easily there if you couldn't use your camouflage, use your skin to change color and
So I'm gonna pause it right there. Can you see if there is an octopus? Like right now, you're probably like analyzing the picture, right? But imagine if you're just like a diver, just diving, like swimming past this, or a fish that's right beside it, or even a predator going, swimming by this, you probably probably can't see the octopus at all. So I'm gonna unpause it, and you're gonna see this like incredible camouflage ability.
Texture. Here's some algae in the foreground, and an octopus.
Right? Check it
Isn't that
out.
amazing? Now Roger spooked him, so as he took off, a cloud of ink, lands, and when he lands, the octopus says, "Look, I've been seen. Best thing to do is get as big as I can get." That big brown makes his eye spot very big, so he's bluffing. Let's do it backwards. I thought he was joking when he first showed it to me. I thought it was all graphics. So here it is in reverse. Watch the skin color. Watch the skin texture. Just an amazing animal. Can change color and texture to match the surroundings.
Did
Watch
you
him
guys
blend
see
right
it?
into this
Like,
algae.
did you see the octopus
1, 2,
in
3.
there, right? It's so neat. Even like the reverse camera, right? To see how like the pigment just came to be, right? It sort of makes you like think,
And now
wow,
he's
like, the
gone and so am
adaptation
I.
of this is incredible, right? So one of the ways that organisms can adapt is we're going to look at it. So there's 3 different kinds, right? One is called the behavioral. So this is the behavior of the organism. Number 2 is the structural. So this is the structural change of the sort of the anatomy of the organism. And then 3rd is the physiology of like the function of the different anatomy of the organism. So if you look at this one, the first one is camouflage. We saw that the octopus has this incredible camouflage ability. So that's structural. So what it is that it's just blending into its surroundings, right? And it's blending into the surroundings. Like I said, if it didn't blend in with the surroundings, then it's easier to see, and eventually they're going to be eaten, and then that sort of organism will be wiped out. But if it adapts to this camouflage ability, it blends in, passes on this trait, and then all the offspring would have it, and then you would have this sort of really cool shape-shifting octopus. I'm going to show you another video about what else they can do as well. Another one is also like mimicry. So some organisms mimic other organisms as well for their protection, because maybe there are some organisms that are a little bit more dangerous, so then natural predators know not to eat them, so some other people just kind of copy them and to make it look like it. So to give you an idea of that mimicry and camouflage, that this shape-shifting octopus is really cool about what else they can do. So let me play this.
Unknown until it was spotted, first by fishermen off the coast of Indonesia in the 1990s. It looked like an octopus, but it could morph its shape in an instant to appear as seemingly any animal around it. At first, no one had any idea what it was.
The first time I saw it, I just was blown away. You couldn't get a more spectacular animal. It really is the pinnacle of wizardry.
Biologist Mark Norman was the first scientist to study this seemingly shapeless creature. He named it the mimic octopus.
The mimic octopus makes itself look like a living, moving animal. So it pulls all its arms around behind its body and swims along like a poisonous flatfish called a banded sole. In other cases,
that's a
if it's
really
getting
good example of
attacked,
mimicry.
It puts 6 arms down a hole and raises the other 2 arms to look like a poisonous sea snake that has bands along its body. If that's not enough, it'll swim
That's
along
another
looking like a
example.
poisonous
Right, like
lionfish.
all these are great
with these
examples.
banded arms looking like the banded spines that come off these very deadly fish.
So far, 15 separate species are known to be in the mimic octopus act, and Norman is not always sure exactly what the mimic is doing. He observed this mimic
look at this
scuttling
one.
along the sea bottom, looking something like a furry turkey with
crazy.
human legs.
Sometimes it's hard when you watch a mimic octopus doing what it does to interpret what's going on. It's a bit like looking at ink spots in a psychiatrist's office going, I don't know what that is. It could be a piano, it could be a fridge. So you get 3 or 4 divers together and you'll argue all night trying to work out what we think it was mimicking.
Where did nature's greatest actor come from?
Yeah, so
Unknown
that
until it
mimic
was-
octopus is really interesting. It can do so much, right? So it also makes you wonder, like, how did that mimicry start and where did that begin, right? Like, how did one octopus start to decide, like, hey, I'm gonna copy this one, and etc., right? Like, and then survive. It's incredible. A physiological example is like antimicrobial resistance. So there are a lot of bacterias out there that become resistant to antibiotics. One reason why when you are prescribed antibiotics, you need to finish the course, because that sort of ensure that everything all inside your body of that bacteria are wiped out, so that they don't get a chance to mutate. There are already a lot of like superbugs. Well, not a lot, but there's a superbug, MRSA, which is like your multi-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. So that's your bacteria. Staphylococcus aureus is a bacteria, but it's just a very common bacteria that's found like on the surface of your skin and everything else. But as that sort of bacteria gets exposed to different environments, antibiotics and all of that, it will mutate. And if the mutation occurs and passes on into the next generation, etc., etc., all that population will become resistant to antibiotics. So that's one example, physiological, is that like bacteria mutates, and that's based on the environment, right? Life in itself is always trying to survive, right? It's always trying to find a way to better itself from the last generation, or try to find a way to survive or adapt to the environment, right? Like you guys right now, we're all adapting to this new sort of normal, right? We're already adapting. That's just like life. I think it's really it's interesting. I know it's very philosophical today, but interesting though. Hibernation by bears, that's a behavioral. So like, in order to sort of survive through the winter, it's best to just hibernate, right? Instead of going out in the cold and looking for food, which is very scarce. So hibernation is a behavior that it has been adapted to promote survival. So these are all different types of survival. Other ones is like, this is a camouflage, just like the octopus, right? This is a pygmy seahorse. You can see the coloration is very similar to the corals that's sitting behind, because now if you're a predator, you probably can't see it. One example of this sort of evolution adaptation is peppered moth, is that there's usually a simulation that we do as a class, but as there's a moth that during the Industrial Revolution, there's a lot of like pollution that goes out, and because of the factories, so the moth initially was white, but then because of the pollution, a lot of the background because of the pollution became very dark. So if you think if you're a white moth and if you're hiding it behind a black background, you stand out, right? So eventually that moth starts to evolve and change its coloration. So the ones that are maybe like darker with like black spots, or eventually become black, will become camouflaged to the background, and they're less likely to be eaten by like birds, like their predator, right? So that white moth has totally evolved into a pepper moth, and then with the dark coloration, because it become camouflaged to the background. Really, really interesting. This really happened because of the environment that it was in. If you look at this one, this is another incredible sort of biodiversity of the life on our planet, right? Leafy sea dragons, like, how does that happen, right? To mimic sort of like the kelp, the sea plants in the ocean, right? That's one. Blue-ringed octopus, like if you ever are into like marine life, you notice that they're very colorful, especially like in the corals. So like this is like all these coloration is just mimicking a lot of the natural corals that exist, right? Imagine if this octopus were to put into like Lake Winnipeg, where it's just like murky or like green or like brown water, right? This would probably stand out and get eaten by like a jackfish or something like that, right? So like this works in this environment. Jackfish probably wouldn't work in this environment because they probably stand out, right? Flounder, you can see that this is crazy, right? It's a flat fish in the bottom of the ocean. The eyes has evolved to be at the top instead of on the sides, right? Because that's how the fish is. This leaf frog, like Can you see how many frogs there are in this picture, right? There's, I think, 3 frogs. There's 1, 2, and 3. They have adapted that sort of camouflage, right? Pretty interesting. Mimicry is also another one. So you can see that to mimic is probably like the best form of flattery, because you're mimicking something, you're copying somebody, right? So here is on the left, it's a plain tiger, and then this is going to mimic this butterfly, and it's for its own protection, right? Like this is it's a pretty neat way to do that. Yeah, oh, and you saw 3 frogs. That's great. This cobra, or this is not even a cobra. This is just like a Malpolin, and it's mimicking the behavior of a cobra to show, like, to scare people, right? Like, it's like you get into a fight and you're mimicking some sort of like martial arts move when you don't really know what they are, right? You probably might have seen this as a kid, right? You get into sort of a fight, and then you mimic these, I don't know, Jackie Chan movies or moves, and then people are like, oh, you know karate or whatever, and then they back off. But like, this is our natural behavior, I guess. Here's a spider, and you notice that this one looks like an ant, but it's a spider because it has 8 legs, right? Whereas an ant should have 6, right? So this one is to mimic the ants that it hunts, right? Like, how deceiving is that? Right? You mimic the ant, like you're going into enemy lines because you want to look exactly like them, and then you stab them in the back pretty much and eat them, right? Like, that's life. Crazy, right? So that's your another one for mimicry. So to finish this off is that we talked about this already. So how your natural selection leads into that population change, which is evolution, is that they respond to an environment, right? Like, environment has different factors, and the thing is, our Earth, our climate, our environment is always changing, right? It's always changing. So then organisms have to adapt to it, and scientists are just worried that because now there's a bigger, influx of human behavior and what we do, that might just increase the rate of change in the environment, that our species or organisms can't adapt as quick. So then they'll eventually die off and become extinct, right? That's what scientists would say. So eventually you have all the different environments, and then the behavior will change, and then those traits gets passed down, and then you have this population change, and that's your evolution in the population. Okay, so that's how evolution occurs. And then finally, like, if you see this, like, this is your male bowerbirds, and they have, in order to entice females, look at this, they have to create this elaborate display. What a great dude, hey? Man, like, there's so many cool things in the wild with our animals. And let me show you a couple more videos of this. I can't select this, but I think I have it on my playlist. So let me check it out. This one is about another bird trying to impress the females for mating.
A bird nerd rarely gets the girl. Just ask. A branch serves as the dance floor. Bird rarely gets the girl. Just ask this avian Casanova. The mannequin. There are over 50 species of this showy little bird, and they all go full out to court the ladies. At breeding time, the brightly colored males stake out a staging area called a lek, the bird equivalent of a singles bar. A branch serves as the dance floor. The act isn't all snazzy steps. Sound is just as important. The buzzes, whirs, and snaps may catch a lady's eye. But the noise also
You notice the
warns
males
other
are the ones that are colorful, right? And they have to do all the dance.
Back off.
They have to compete with other males. right? So the best dancer wins the mate.
And if all else
Sometimes
fails,
that actually doesn't stem
show
too
some
far
leg.
from a human species either.
The competition is
Right,
so
it's pretty
fierce
neat.
that only alpha males will mate. Now that makes online dating look easy.
So that makes a male bird, like if this male bird mates, that means that their offspring maybe have really good dancing shoes, the ability to dance, and then that gets passed on, right? So that's another way of evolution that can occur. So I don't want to spoil with all the videos just yet, but I want to show you the assignment that I have assigned to you. It's about just types of adaptation. So hopefully this one would be like a little bit more fun instead of just kind of reading and writing. You are just going to find an organism, and you're gonna create. You don't need to create a small poster, but just put this into a Word document. And you're going to find one organism that has an adaptation. So whether it's like behavioral, physiological, or structural, you just have to mention that. And then find something that's neat, find something that's cool out there. Don't just like, oh, tigers have stripes and they're camouflage, right? Find something that's unique, that are a little bit bizarre, that you haven't seen. I like National Geographic Wild is a really good YouTube to search up, because that's where you see all these organisms that you don't really normally see, right? So what you're going to do is tell me the name of the species, description of the adaptation, like what exactly did they adapt to, and what's the environmental factors, the type of adaptation present. So is it a behavioral, physiological, or structural? And then you're going to just briefly tell me an explanation how the adaptation will help them for their survival. And then you can include a picture of this. You can either draw it, a diagram of the organism, simple as that, right? So hopefully this assignment will give you a little bit like of just research of looking for something that's kind of more fun. All right. That's all for this evolution stuff. Moving on next week, we're going to talk about biodiversity, which relates to evolution anyway. So it's not like we're completely dropping evolution. Everything from now on, we're looking at like what's the purpose of this structure, and how does that affect evolution, et cetera, in biodiversity, because we're going to look at all sorts of life and how life is organized on Earth, right? So if there's nothing else, and yeah, thanks for dropping by. I'll see you on Tuesday. This assignment is due next week, so next Thursday, I think. Yeah, you can probably finish this way before that. But look for something cool. Like, look for something that you've never seen before. I think that's the most important part. All right, that's it. Okay, take care. I'll see you on Tuesday. All right, bye.